Welcome. Welcome to our session. This is our breakout session on housing investments as a cross-cutting solution for climate change and to stimulate the economy. Thank you to the organizer for including us in the program. Today's panel features Edmond Vardoumian, CEO of the National Mortgage Company, and Pierre Aikaisian from the French Development Agency to discuss their collaboration on extending credit for consumer retrofits in Armenia. Leila Kabalan from Miyamoto International will present some of their work on housing retrofit programs on green and disaster prevention in a range of countries, including Turkey. And Dr. Zoran Kostov, the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity Macedonia, will introduce some of the innovative green retrofit programs they have been involved with in Macedonia and in the region. This event is organized by the newly formed Way Forward Coalition, which includes organizations engaged in improving housing outcome, including Habitat for Humanity, Terwilliger Center for Innovation in Shelter, and international and regional development organizations that are included in this program, such as the French Agency for Development and Miyamoto. The Way Forward Coalition unites around the vision that housing must be part of the way forward from the pandemic and a driver of economic recovery and long-term growth in emerging markets. It aims to raise the profile of housing as a development priority, and through its Creative Housing Action CHA initiative, takes this message of housing as a driver of economic recovery and growth to governments and offer practical assistance. Housing investment is an often overlooked cost-cutting solution to tackling climate change and stimulating the economy post-COVID-19. Among the initial economic recovery plan in response to the pandemic that were analyzed by the IMF for 196 countries, only 22 countries, or about 11% of the countries analyzed, explicitly included housing initiatives. This does not reflect both the potential and need for investing in housing to support economic growth and reach developmental goals, including in terms of energy efficiency and disaster resiliency, which will be the focus of the panelist presentation. This panel focuses on retrofit for energy efficiency and climate preparedness intervention that will also reduce energy poverty and boost economic activity. Without new ways of financing and scaling retrofit, particularly for lower-income households, countries will not be reaching their greenhouse gas emission reduction goal, given the contribution of the building sector to this emission. I will start by briefly presenting some highlights from two recent reports that were produced by Habitat TCIS, the Cornerstone report examining the contribution of housing to GDP, and the Ladder Up report analyzing the role of construction in creating jobs and the characteristics of construction workers in selected emerging economies. I encourage you to look at the report for more details, since this will be just a brief highlight. I will now share a few slides. Thank you. So last year in the Cornerstone report, we showed that housing investment represented about 4 to 6% of GDP and housing services about 10 to 14%, with housing representing around 1/6 of the economy of 8 emerging market economies. And this is more broadly the case, including in Eastern and Central European countries. Turkey is on the higher end of that range at 22%, but in general, housing is about 1/6 to 1/5 of the economy. So a really substantial share of the economy. And that also has big implications for job creation. Next slide, please. In our recently released Ladder Up report, we show that across a broad range of countries, the construction sector represents about 6% of total employment, more in some of the regions that are growing the fastest, and that it's really one of the main employment sectors, often one of the largest in many emerging countries. Next slide, please. We also estimated the impact of an increase in 1 unit of construction on the overall economy and of an additional job in construction on overall employment. In both cases, we found substantial multiplier effects, on average 1 for the output multiplier and 1.8 for the employment multiplier. That means that investing in housing, an investment that would marginally increase construction output by 1 million, for example, would be expected to result in overall growth in economic output of 2.1 million. Those numbers are at the margin, but are really substantial. And an increase of 1 job in the construction sector is expected to create another 0.8 job in connected industries for a full year. So those are a really substantial multiplier effect that underscore the importance of supporting the housing and construction sector on overall economic growth. Next slide, please. However, the construction sector has lagged the rest of the economy in terms of productivity growth. Next slide, please. And what we see that in terms of productivity, most other sectors have grown at a much faster pace than construction, and construction has had limited gain in overall productivity. This is a general issue that affects countries across the world, and innovation in the construction sector is therefore really needed to lower the cost of production and improve housing conditions. Attention and intervention are needed so that we can stimulate the sector and address urgent housing need, including retrofitting the existing stock to make it more resilient in the face of climate change and in response to natural disaster. Currently, governments have included limited housing-related programs as part of the stimulus packages, and housing is a relatively small share of government expenditure. Our panelists will now present some programs that have the potential to contribute to deliver investment for retrofit of the existing building stock to make it more energy efficient and resilient in the face of disaster. So we will start with our first two panelists. We'll speak to AFD's experience working with the national mortgage company in Armenia to finance an energy retrofit program. So Edmond Vardumian and CRP Akazian, the floor is yours. Edmond, you're muted.
Thank you. Dear panelists and guests, my pleasure to be here at this significant event. Thank you so much to Habitat for Humanity for organizing the forum and inviting National Mortgage Company of Armenia to participate in this session. I will briefly describe the country National Mortgage Company. Located in the Caucasus, Armenia is a small landlocked country with a population of approximately 3 million. As of 2020, its GDP per capita is slightly over $4,000, making it a mid-income country. National Mortgage Company was established in 2009 as a refinancing organization with the goal of increasing housing finance access for low and middle-income families, as well as integrating the housing and capital markets. Our operations are funded through equity, bond issuances, and IFI programs, such as the EE microloan program funded by French Development Agency. Over the last 12 years, NMC has achieved a significant reduction in housing loan interest rates, an increase in loan maturity, and we have set up sound fixed-rate lending practices in local currency. We offer acquisition, renovation, and single-family house construction loans with an emphasis on promoting energy efficiency and regional rural investment. Our products are now affordable for a broader group of people due to the measures we implemented with the help of our international partners. French Development Agency and NMC launched the Social and Energy Efficiency Housing Finance Program in 2012 with support from the European Commission. The overall goal was to promote sound energy efficiency practices. Additionally, the program aimed to build a sustainable EE housing renovation finance model in Armenia, including one for multi-apartment buildings, as well as to develop a long-term business strategy for National Mortgage Company. Armenia's national policy in this area is closely connected to the EU-Armenia Comprehensive and Enhanced Partnership Agreement. After independence from the Soviet Union, privatization efforts resulted in over 99% of Armenia's housing stock being private. There are more than 400,000 separate dwellings and 20,000 multi-apartment buildings, most of which have poor energy efficiency and lack sufficient insulation. Armenia's real estate market has demonstrated significant positive dynamics, which is largely driven by a rapidly growing mortgage market, about 25% per annum since 2017. Also, Armenia has a large number of housing finance products, especially for such a small market. However, residential sector in Armenia uses energy inefficiently. Buildings from the Soviet Union era lack thermal insulation, which in combination with the low income of an average Armenian family places a significant financial burden on households, causing many to underheat their houses. Furthermore, there is also a general lack of awareness about the savings that can be generated by investing in energy efficiency. The first phase of the EE microloan program, or as we call it, Wormhouse product, became operational in 2014. It began with a concessional loan of 10 million euros from French Development Agency and a grant of 700,000 euros from the European Union. The loan product has been designed to be affordable, especially for families living in regional and rural areas. No real estate collateral is required, a grace period of up to 12 months is available, and a grant of up to 15% of the loan amount was available until recently. Also, a web-based tool was developed in 2019 to make energy efficiency assessments widely available. Having successfully completed the first phase this year, NMC and AFD have entered the second phase of the program with an equivalent of 20 million euro concessional loan, but this time without a grant component. In the past 7 years, about 9,000 families have benefited from the loan and over 7,500 families have benefited from the EU grant. Approximately 80% of funds have been devoted to energy efficiency investments in secondary cities and rural areas. Around 40% of funds have been invested in making single-family houses more energy efficient. The energy efficiency component of investments has been highly encouraged, and as a result, over the last 2 years, the energy efficiency share in total investment has been on average 95%. This has resulted in a 63% energy saving compared with the country baseline. In terms of GHG emission reduction, to date, it is over 11,000 tons CO2 equivalent per year. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Edmond. Dear participants, taking over from my colleague Edmond Vardumian, I would like to start my speech by thanking Habitat for Humanity for organizing the forum and making French Development Agency a part of it. The French Development Agency group funds, supports, and accelerates the transition to a fairer and more sustainable world, among others focusing on climate, biodiversity, and urban development. Our teams carry out more than 4,000 projects in France's overseas departments and territories and another 115 countries. In this way, we contribute to the commitment of France and French people to support the sustainable development goals. Energy efficiency is a key focus area for AFD to tackle in terms of its overall goals, and combining it with the access to finance made a perfect match to start the project with the National Mortgage Company. Armenia has a quite developed banking sector on one hand and well-advanced energy efficiency promotion framework on the other hand. However, due to the lack of availability of affordable loans for energy efficient renovations in the local market, households struggling with high energy costs are not able to borrow for energy efficient measures to reduce their monthly energy bills. As a result, a large share of family budget is spent for electricity and heating, very often without proper comfort conditions. The first program indicated by Edmond earlier proved to be a successful one, and a new concessional loan was requested in 2020 to replace and double the impact and to capitalize on all the work already done. The purpose of the program is to stimulate energy efficiency renovation of housing for lower and middle income population in rural areas as indicated and secondary cities, and to encourage financial institutions to grant smaller loans with longer maturity than currently practiced for the energy efficient renovations. In order to multiply the effect of the program, a complementary program with potential EU fund is being developed. The main objective of this program would be to support the development of energy efficiency in condominiums of Armenia, which is currently an underdeveloped sector. The program would consider two main components: a public policy dialogue that could be implemented on the specific subject of the energy efficiency in multi-apartment buildings, and a pilot project that could be designed to initiate a first concrete experience in the sector. a technical assistance program would be implemented to support the implementation of these two components with the following specific objectives: to lift the legislative and regulatory obstacles to the development of market for energy renovation in condominiums, accompany investment in the segment through a pilot program to renovate condominium buildings, and assess the needs in terms of development of a recycling sector for the households, electrical appliances that are replaced through the project implemented by NMC. This concludes my speech, and I would like to thank again for the opportunity to share our experience on this particular platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so our next speaker will now present Miyamoto's International Housing Retrofit Programs. So Leila Kabalan.
All right. Okay, I assume you can see my slides. Hi, my name is Leila, and I work at Miyamoto International. We're a structural engineering firm. We're based out of Los Angeles, but we have offices all over the world, and we do mostly retrofitting and seismic risk work. So I'm going to do a little bit of a generic overview on how the housing landscape looks like, and then I'll walk through some examples. It's very important to understand that over a third of the energy consumed by a building is already met by the time the building is built. And that's due to the carbon embodiment, which is the carbon footprint that is already existing in the building material that arise from extracting, transporting, manufacturing, and installing a building material on site, as well as the operational and end-of-life emissions associated with those materials. So it's very important to understand that already to get a building off the ground, it has a lot of the carbon footprint that we try to mitigate in it. When it comes to disasters cause the destruction, demolition, and rebuilding. And so add to that the existing footprint that I just talked about, and staggering amount of additional carbon footprint when your housing stock is not disaster risk ready. If we focus a little bit on Europe, we can see that this is the map of the seismic risk in Europe. There are two fault lines in Europe. One goes from the Icelandic side, and then the most common one that we see disasters go through is the North Anatolian fault line, which covers the eastern part of the Euro-Mediterranean region. If we want to understand the building stock in Europe as well, we know that only 1% of buildings undergo energy efficient renovations every year. However, 75% of buildings in the EU are not energy efficient, and 85 to 95% of today's building will still be in use by 2050. It's also worth noting that the building stock in Europe, up to 50%, depending on which countries you're looking at, but for example, in Italy, 76% of it was built before 1976, and that is before the introduction of any energy efficiency or retrofitting guidelines into the building code. Resilience need to be established thus early on, because even if we build new homes, they can easily be destroyed, and we go through the cycle again that I explained earlier on. This is a photo from Haiti, taken by one of our staff members on site, and these were houses that were supposed to be delivered to new residents, and as you can see, there was another earthquake that causes this destruction. So now not only is the embodiment footprint there, but that demolition of that building as well. It's also very important, especially given this forum, to understand that not only disasters destroy houses, bad public policy, bad housing policy, which is what we are talking about in this forum, is also a very big destroyer of buildings and a huge waste of carbon emissions. Here we see one abandoned housing project that is not well connected to the city, doesn't fit the lifestyle of those that it's claimed to deliver for. There are even harder to imagine cases like this I'm sure some of you are familiar with. It's called Burj Al Babas. It's a housing development in Turkey, and those are mini castles. Now they call it abandoned Disneyland, and it's 530 castles that are sitting empty because I assume no one wants to live in mini castles, and the housing project is really far and not well connected to the city. So a lot of money, carbon emissions have been, used up to develop this project, and very little comes out of it in terms of actual housing. Here we also have a very famous case of the public housing demolition in the US. This is from Chicago, example of these huge, units that with time, with decay, have had to, the only way to get rid of them was to demolish them. Again, a huge carbon footprint. So that's to highlight that different policies when it comes to housing can also have a huge detrimental effect on the efficiency of housing. Thus, from Miyamoto's perspective, it's very important to maintain and upgrade existing the housing stock. We see that there is a lot of attention being paid to new housing. Ribbon cutting ceremonies, all of those are very important moments in public policy, and we understand that adding to the housing stock is very important. But as important as it is, there are very detrimental effects that happen when we don't maintain and upgrade the existing housing stock. We hear about the larger disasters that happen, especially, for example, in Turkey when it comes to earthquakes. However, very few of us keep up with the daily disasters that happens from collapsing buildings. I just Googled it 2 days ago. 21 survived being buried under rubble, 8 dead in another building that collapsed in Turkey. But when it comes to maintaining and upgrading the existing housing stock, there are very good and innovative solutions. However, they can also be quite heavy when it comes to red tape. For example, Italy just put out a great building renovation scheme that can cover up to 110% in tax credits, any retrofits that cover energy efficiency, greening, etc., especially for buildings built before 1976. However, a survey showed that 3 million Italians interested in this project have given up because of documents required. And then an additional 6 million said that they do not fully understand how the program actually works. So it's very important when we put out these energy efficient programs to also understand that time is money when it comes to construction and renovating. Developers in the private sector, which we are as a structural engineering firm, very familiar with their timelines. Every day that they have a snag or hit in the development or retrofitting is a day when they are losing a lot of the very capital intensive construction loans that they have to put up with. So it's very important for us to also understand how we are putting these renovation schemes into the market and how the uptake of them is measured. From Miyamoto's perspective, I'll just walk you through some of the innovative retrofitting solutions, because the traditional solutions can be quite costly and can be just bringing also in material that are not very available in this economy that you're working with. I heard cases of Armenia, for example. It is sometimes a higher carbon embodiment as well when you're trying to also export material into countries. So from our work, we've worked with something called the PP band, which is kind of similar to when you buy a package from Amazon that is very hardly wrapped. Those are very, very strong materials that can cost only a few $100s, that can retrofit buildings. There's also bamboo, which is locally available. It's green, it's affordable, and that is very common in some of the Asian countries we've worked in. There are more solutions, but I think it's better to maybe have a conversation about it. What I wanted to highlight in this forum is that sustainability and resilience go together when it comes to housing. It's not about only adding to the housing stock or starting new retrofitting programs, but understanding also how the private sector and the uptake for those can happen when it comes to new constructions. That's it for me, and thank you.
Thank you, Leila. And so our next speaker will discuss Habitat's work in Macedonia on some of those underground energy retrofit, Dr. Zoran Kostov. Zoran, you might be muted if you're speaking. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry again with this issue with the technology. Hi everybody, I'm Zoran Kostov. I come from Macedonia. I'm National Director of Habitat for Humanity in Macedonia, and what we had for this session is actually to illustrate our 10 years long work with residential energy efficiency. The illustration that we wanted to share is a video that was shot this summer. It is currently actually posted on one of BBC sites, since it was a BBC video, and then to maybe discuss what was the main message from the video. But there is no time available for that kind of discussion, so just a short introduction that Habitat Macedonia does residential energy efficiency improvements for more than a decade. And then we are for more than a decade looking or trying to identify market-based models, which is not easy. So we came after many years of testing models to a conclusion that it should be a kind of combined effort, some small subsidy by the local or central government, plus loans, affordable loans. My colleagues were already talking about this to the homeowners or homeowners associations or construction companies. The biggest challenge, at least for us in Macedonia, is the residential energy efficiency improvement of the multifamily apartment buildings, since the housing stock in the country is 96% privatized, and it is not easy to reach the consensus among the homeowners to do something with their building. That's our main focus. And for this purpose, we need some regulatory improvement that is not easy to achieve, given the political and many other circumstances in the country. But we are doing our best. In the past 10 years, we renovated nearly 70 buildings with several thousands of apartments. And then the building that you are going to see with this video is one of our first buildings that was renovated some 10 years ago or even more. So let us look at the video. Thank you very much for the attention.
Monica, are you good?
About 2/3 of the buildings in Skopje were built between the 50s and the 80s, a period where we were part of the socialist world, and they were state-built, owned, and maintained. This all dramatically changed in '91, where most of the tenants who lived in these buildings got to privatize them for very little money. The tenants here were then left with an issue which drags on to this day, how to maintain and manage this property.
Ovde živim od 1982 година. Па кога се вселивме, таа година зградата беше пак релативно добро одржувана, та и армијата си имаше своји екипи кои ја одржуваа зградата. Со распадот на Југославија, значи армијата се повлече и комплетното после одржување на целокупната инфраструктура во зградава се падна на грбот на станариве кои живеат тука.
There are about 12,000 of these buildings that are in need of renovation. That is a lot of investment that is required in a country which doesn't have the means and the capacity to support refurbishment of 12,000 buildings.
In this region, energy poverty is a big issue. We know that housing is a problem, but we also know that energy efficient housing is a problem. So this project addresses that in an affordable and sustainable way. USAID and Habitat for Humanity, since 2011, have partnered on the Regional Energy Efficiency for Low-Income Households project here in North Macedonia. And after that, it spread to other countries in the region.
И тоа е прва зграда реновирана на тој начин. Значи, па добро, на почеток имаше, луѓето се уште веруваат дека некој ќе дојде да им поправи нешто во зградава. Пада парчиња од таа фасада и постоеше опасност дори да некој настрада доле кога ќе паднат. Тоа беше хорор ситуација. Искршени врата, стакла, лифтовите час работат, час не работат. И така стапивме во контакт преку општината, значи преку општината со Хабитат и они се сложија да го финансираат замената на прозорците во зграда. Со кредит кој го одобрија на 2 години.
Mile's building is very big. It has 110 apartments, and the bigger the building, the more difficult it is to make a decision to renovate the building, because basically all tenants have to come together. Mile was instrumental in putting together these tenants. He worked with all sides of the spectrum, and we were able to finally reach a decision. And that's exactly what it takes to renovate these apartments.
2008 година, кога се заврши промената на прозориве и фасадата, кога се направи, ние го тоа осетивме преку сметките за парно грејање. Ајде да така кажеме, значи некои 30% пониски сметки за парно грејање. Во меѓувреме, пошто зградава е стара, а има равен кров горе, почна протекување на горните станари. Значи, мал дожд протече доле, со помош на Хабитат поставиме кров горе, како не би доаѓало до такви последици. Си стои тука затворено, нема више протекување.
There are multiple benefits to renovating apartment buildings. You will also be contributing less to the pollution, because the housing sector is one of the contributors to both CO2 emissions, but also to the local pollutants, especially if you use wood for heating, but also some of the other fuels. So you will address an environmental issue by renovating the housing stock.
Here in North Macedonia, the partnership has worked to refurbish at least 62 residential buildings in 8 municipalities. The project is replicable. It increases energy efficiency and the affordability of houses. So what we encourage other development partners to do is to adopt the model so that we can reach even more citizens in more countries across the region.
Тоа е основата, значи да луѓето сватат дека зградава не е ни моја, ни ваша, ни на овој, ни на оној, него е на сите нас таа зграда и за таа зграда мора да водиме сметка. Луѓето помалку сватија, требаше стварно долго време, сватија дека зградава е заеднички дом.
It's so sad to see that many people in this country still have to live in what are basically substandard living conditions in the multi-apartment sector, especially knowing that these are problems that have a solution. This makes us even more committed to addressing this challenge.
Thank you, Zoran, for sharing this video that really bring it to the residents and the impact it can have. So given the time we have left, we had a question that was prepared for panelists, but since we have also questions from the audience, I will try to integrate them in our conversation. So the question we had was really around how to accelerate the pace of investment and the opportunity to scale up retrofit in the countries you have been working in. But let's start with Armenia, and if you can incorporate in that response some of the questions we had. One of them was, why was the grant component cut from the second phase, since usually poor homeowner association are late to apply for funding and so will need a higher, will now pay a higher price for innovation? And the other one was, what kind of loan do households for multifamily building in Armenia take? Are those collective loans against the entire building or individual loan? And what is the average size of the household loan? Do they receive technical assistance to apply for a loan? If so, who pays for it? And so if you can try to address those questions in your response to, that would be great. Edmond and Sarah.
Thank you. How much time do we have for so many questions? Because as far as I understood, there are 7 questions there.
Yeah, as brief as possible, but yeah, 2 to 3 minutes.
So, how you wish, CRP? Maybe I can start and then you can complement. Okay, let's start from the problems that we have in accelerating building retrofits in Armenia. I think one of the main problems here is the legislative gaps, and especially enforceability and applicability issues. The second one is the usually retrofit projects are non-bankable due to limited borrowing capacity of building owners, condominiums, and local government. So in order to achieve to scale up this project, I think first we need assistance with legal and regulatory issues. Concessional funding and grant co-financing of projects could increase the borrowing capacity of beneficiaries and also reduce the payback period for the beneficiaries. And we believe that there is a need for uncomplicated loan products and risk-sharing mechanisms for multi-apartment buildings in order to increase the accelerate building retrofits. As for the rest of the questions, individual versus building level loans. At this stage, so far, the main focus has been on individual loans. So it was the individual that borrowed under the program, and then at a preferential terms. The second question, it was about the average loan amount. The maximum loan amount is roughly 5,500 euros, and the average loan amount from 1,500 to 2,000 euros. Why we don't have a grant component for the second phase? Basically, we have designed the product in such a way that people are capable of borrowing without this grant component. This is a small loan, and the term of the loan used to be shorter, but currently it is from 8 to 10 years. So 2,000 loan, let's say, for 10 years, it's just 20 euros per month. So the payment is so small that a lot of people currently can afford, even in secondary cities and villages. Most of the investments are in secondary cities and villages under this program. And if I missed any question, please remind me.
That's great. CRP, maybe if you had any.
Yeah, I totally agree with all the points highlighted by Edmond. Thank you. Just one small remark on the grant component. Indeed, now it's more affordable and more attractive, let's say. That's why we have not included a grant component. But instead, as I have mentioned, the grant component will come to do the project on energy efficiency in buildings with the technical assistance to tackle the issues highlighted by Edmond earlier on the legal framework, reinforcement, etc. So it's going to be grant, but of a different type to more scale up the overall framework.
Thank you. And so, Leila, for your project, one of the comments was retrofitting to make building earthquake resilient more than double the cost of renovation. Are you involved in program to finance this additional cost, or do you know of examples?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is very costly to retrofit buildings. That's correct, especially older buildings. There are global facilities that fund these through government entities. So, for example, I can think of the top of my head the GFDRR, which is the Global Facility for Disaster Risk Reduction. They have a large retrofitting program that they work with some housing agencies, whether it's through tax credits, which I know can be complicated, but it's through tax credits or through subsidies. The issue that arises with that is that the construction world does not always want to go through these programs because it is costly to go through them from their own terms, in terms of extending the timelines, having to go through multiple layers of engineering approvals. Once we talk about retrofitting guidelines, then also there are national agencies that you have to go through. The either national retrofitting guideline architecture unions or engineering syndicates, things of that sort. So these projects exist and the subsidies are there. I think the mismatch that happens is how we can meet those subsidies with the construction and development firms that look at those timelines quite different than how the public sector or how the consumer looks at those timelines. I think that's like the missing link that I find is not very discussed or not very present in housing forums and discussions on retrofitting.
There wasn't really a question, but just saying that the clip was really well done and showing, yeah, that impact on residents' health and well-being and the importance for the residents. Do you want to comment a bit on what are your plans going forward and how the region that has kind of a similar set of housing stock and history is trying to scale up those retrofit program and the barriers to that?
Okay, our intention is actually to scale up as all of us expect, and then there are discussions what it means and how do we achieve scaling up of this. In Macedonia, as the video said, there are more than 10,000 buildings, and with our program we did only, let's say, 1% of them or 0.5% of them. And scaling up, it is something that is possible only if there is national energy efficiency fund. Since our own revolving fund, it is limited, and then we cannot serve that much people. But more than this, we need to improve the regulatory framework for achieving, say, consent among the homeowners in order to improve the energy efficiency, particularly in multifamily apartment buildings. It is the much difficult work compared to improving energy efficiency of the individual houses. So we work with the government on new housing law or condominium law, and once this is done, then we expect this program to scale up and the government to take part in a more, let's say, substantial manner. Currently, only local governments participate in this program.
And so are there proposals to have like a rule so that you don't need unanimity among homeowners, but only a qualified majority, or has there been movement in that direction, since it seemed like hold-up might be quite difficult to resolve?
I believe all of us are aware of this situation, and then what we expect with the new law actually is that once the decision is made by the majority, we don't need 100% consent. We need majority, and that's okay. But once the consent is not consent, but once there is a majority, then we don't know what to do with the minority. And minority, say 90, not 90, but 49%, sometimes might be 49% of the homeowners in the building. And it is not easy to impose whatever rule on the minority if the minority do not want to participate. That's the legal challenge that we are trying to resolve. and government should come in and help with some better solutions on this.
Thank you. And so yes, so it sounds like from the presentation there are very various level of issues from the more technical, how do we deliver it, from Miyamoto, to more of the social, how do we coordinate efforts, and how do we get agreement to the financial, and how do we find the fund and capital to provide us retrofit in all of those countries, and that our existing building stock across the world. So thank you for providing this example to the audience and for this rich discussion. And I look forward to seeing some of those projects moving forward in the year to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.